Captain Marcus Chen stood alone on the bridge of the UHS Retribution, staring at the tactical display that showed empty space where Earth's solar system should have been. 3 years had passed since the Vorthan Empire had glassed his homeworld, reducing humanity's cradle to nothing but floating debris and bitter memories. The silence in space was deafening, broken only by the steady hum of life support systems and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. The Retribution drifted in the shadow of a dead moon, her hull scarred and patched from countless engagements. She was the last of humanity's great warships, a kilometer-long beast of metal and fury that had once been the pride of the Terran defense fleet. Now she was something else entirely, the ghost ship crewed by the last free humans in the galaxy, carrying weapons that could crack planets and a crew that had nothing left to lose. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Sarah Webb from the communications station. Her voice was steady despite the exhaustion that lined her face. Like everyone aboard, she had been running on determination and stimulants for months. "We're receiving standard Galactic Council broadcasts. The Zephyrians are celebrating the 3rd anniversary of what they're calling Liberation Day." Marcus clenched his jaw. Liberation Day. As if wiping out 12 billion humans had been some kind of charitable act. The Galactic Council had stood by and watched as the Vorthans systematically destroyed every human colony, calling it a necessary correction to galactic stability. They had painted humanity as aggressive expansionists, dangerous wildcards who threatened the peace that had existed for millennia. "Anything else?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying the weight of command and loss. "Yes, sir. The Council has officially disbanded the human quarantine zone. All former human territories are being opened for colonization. The Crystalline Confederation has already claimed the Proxima Centauri system." Webb's fingers tightened on her console. Her family had lived on Proxima Colony before the war. Marcus walked to the main viewport, looking out at the stars that had once seemed full of promise. When humanity had first achieved faster-than-light travel and encountered the galactic community, they had been naive enough to believe they could find their place among the stars through diplomacy and cooperation. They had been wrong. The galaxy operated on a simple principle that humans had been too idealistic to understand: might made right, and the strong consumed the weak. Humanity's rapid technological advancement and military prowess had threatened that established order. The older species had watched with growing alarm as humans proved themselves capable fighters, innovative engineers, and stubborn survivors who refused to accept their assigned place at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. "Commander Torres, report," Marcus called to his second-in-command. Elena Torres emerged from the tactical alcove, her dark eyes reflecting the same burning anger that drove them all. She had been a xenobiologist before the war, studying alien cultures with the hope of building bridges between species. Now she was humanity's foremost expert on alien weaknesses, having spent 3 years learning exactly how to kill every species that had betrayed them. "All departments report ready, Captain. Engineering has the new modifications online. Dr. Harrison's bioweapons are loaded and tested. We're as prepared as we'll ever be." She paused, studying his face. "Are you certain about this course of action? Once we begin, there's no going back." Marcus turned from the viewport to face his crew. The bridge was manned by just 8 people now, the survivors of what had once been a complement of 3,000. Each of them was a specialist, cross-trained in multiple roles out of necessity. They were the best of what remained of humanity, and they had made their choice long ago. 3 years ago, the galaxy decided humanity was too dangerous to exist, Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the bridge. "They watched as the Vorthans burned our worlds. They celebrated our extinction. They carved up our territories like vultures picking at bones. But they made one critical mistake." He moved to the command chair, the seat he had occupied through humanity's darkest hour. "They left one ship alive. One ship full of humans who remember what we lost and why we fight. The Retribution isn't just our last warship, she's our promise that humanity will never be forgotten." At the sensor station, Ensign Kim Park looked up from her displays. She was barely 25, one of the youngest survivors, and had lost her entire extended family when the Vorthans hit the agricultural worlds. "Captain, I'm reading massive fleet movements in the core systems. It looks like the Council is gathering for some kind of celebration." Marcus smiled grimly. Intelligence reports had suggested this might happen. The 3rd anniversary of humanity's defeat was apparently going to be marked by a grand ceremony, with representatives from every major species gathering in the Nexus system to toast their mutual security. It would be the largest gathering of galactic leadership in over a century. How large a gathering? Torres asked, moving to look over Park's shoulder at the sensor data. Conservative estimate? Over 200 capital ships from 15 different species. The Vorthan High Command will be there, along with the Crystalline Hegemony's ruling council and the Zephyrian royal family. It's essentially every leader who signed off on our extermination. Park's voice carried a mix of excitement and terror. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. This was it, the opportunity they had been waiting for. The chance to show the galaxy that humanity was far from extinct. The Retribution carried enough firepower to level continents and weapons systems that the galaxy's best scientists couldn't replicate. She was the culmination of human military technology, enhanced by 3 years of desperate innovation and powered by the fury of a dying species. Set course for the Nexus system, Marcus commanded. Best possible speed. The bridge crew exchanged glances before moving to their stations. They all knew what this meant. The Retribution was fast for a ship her size, but it would take them 6 days to reach Nexus. 6 days to prepare for what would likely be their final battle. 6 days to get ready to remind the galaxy why they had feared humanity in the first place. As the ship's massive engines spun up, Marcus opened a ship-wide communication channel. Throughout the Retribution, in engineering bays and weapons decks, in medical facilities and crew quarters, the last free humans stopped what they were doing to listen to their captain's words. Attention all hands. For 3 years, we've survived in the shadows while the galaxy celebrated our extinction. We've watched as our enemies divided up our worlds and erased our history. We've endured in silence while they convinced themselves that humanity was nothing more than a footnote in galactic history. The engine vibration intensified as the Retribution began building toward faster-than-light speeds. But silence was never surrender. It was preparation. Every modification we've made, every weapon we've tested, every strategy we've developed, it's all been leading to this moment. The galaxy thought they could destroy us without consequence. They're about to learn how wrong they were. Marcus paused, feeling the weight of species survival on his shoulders. In 6 days, we reach Nexus. In 6 days, we show the galaxy that humanity refuses to go quietly into extinction. We don't seek conquest or revenge, we seek justice. And if we must become monsters to deliver that justice, then we'll be the monsters they created when they chose to exterminate innocence. The communication channel closed, leaving the bridge in contemplative silence. Through the viewport, stars began to streak as the Retribution entered faster-than-light travel. She was carrying humanity's last hope toward either vindication or destruction, and none of her crew particularly cared which it would be. They had all died the day Earth burned. Everything since then had just been borrowed time. Lieutenant Webb looked up from her station, where she had been monitoring long-range communications. Captain, I'm picking up transmissions from the Celebration Fleet. They're calling it the Peace Through Strength ceremony. The Vorthan Emperor is planning to give a speech about the necessity of decisive action against threats to galactic stability. Marcus almost laughed. Peace through strength. They were going to learn about strength soon enough. The Retribution had been designed as humanity's answer to the galaxy's largest warships, incorporating technology that had taken human engineers centuries to develop. She was fast enough to outrun most pursuers, strong enough to engage multiple opponents simultaneously, and armed with weapons that could turn battle groups into expanding clouds of debris. But, more than her technology, she carried something that the galaxy had forgotten in their millennia of peaceful coexistence, the desperate fury of a species with nothing left to lose. Humans had always fought hardest when cornered, and there was no corner tighter than the edge of extinction. Torres, I want full battle preparations completed by the time we arrive, Marcus ordered. Every weapon system checked and double-checked. All crew at combat stations. We get one chance at this, and we're going to make it count. Understood, Captain. What about communications? Do we attempt any kind of warning or ultimatum? Marcus considered this for a moment, then shook his head. No warnings. No ultimatums. No chances for surrender or negotiation. They didn't offer those courtesies to the children of Earth, and we won't extend them now. The Retribution speaks with her guns, and that's the only language they'll understand. As the ship hurtled through hyperspace toward its destiny, Marcus found himself thinking about the weight of what they were about to do. The galaxy would call them terrorists, monsters, the final proof that humanity had always been a threat that needed elimination. History would be written by the survivors, and it wouldn't be kind to the crew of the Retribution. But history had already been unkind to 12 billion dead humans, so that hardly mattered. What mattered was ensuring that humanity's extinction came with a price so terrible that no species would ever again think genocide was an acceptable solution to political problems. The galaxy had chosen to settle their differences with violence, and now they would discover that humans had always been exceptionally good at violence when properly motivated. The countdown had begun. In less than 6 days, the last free humans in the galaxy would remind everyone why their species had been feared in the first place. The galaxy had let its guard down, assuming the threat was eliminated. They were about to learn that humans were never more dangerous than when they had nothing left to lose. Dr. Amanda Harrison worked alone in the Retribution's bioweapons laboratory, surrounded by containers that held humanity's darkest innovations. Her hands moved with practiced precision as she prepared the final batch of what the crew had nicknamed species-specific solutions, engineered viruses designed to target the unique biology of each alien race that had participated in humanity's genocide. Before the war, Amanda had been Earth's leading expert in xenobiology and interspecies medicine. She had dedicated her career to finding ways to help humans and aliens coexist safely, studying alien diseases to prevent cross-species contamination. Now that knowledge served a darker purpose. Every healing technique she had learned could be reversed, every biological defense mechanism could be turned into a weapon. The irony wasn't lost on her. The Galactic Council had always praised her research, calling it essential for peaceful coexistence. They had funded her laboratories, provided her with alien test subjects, and celebrated her discoveries. None of them had suspected that their generous cooperation was teaching her exactly how to kill them. "Computer, begin final synthesis of compound V7, she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was creating. The laboratory's automated systems hummed to life, mixing proteins and genetic sequences in precisely calculated proportions. Compound V7 was designed specifically for Vorthan physiology. It would cause their cellular structure to break down at the molecular level while leaving other species completely unaffected. The process would take 3 hours to complete, giving her time to review the other compounds she had prepared. Compound Z3 targeted Zephyrian respiratory systems, essentially drowning them in their own bodily fluids. Compound C12 attacked the crystalline matrix that formed the backbone of crystalline confederation biology, turning their bodies into brittle glass that would shatter at the slightest impact. Each compound represented years of research and months of careful preparation. Amanda had tested them extensively using tissue samples salvaged from battlefields and genetic databases captured during the war. Every formula was perfect, designed to be fast-acting, untraceable, and absolutely lethal to its target species while remaining completely harmless to humans. A soft chime indicated that someone was requesting entry to the laboratory. Amanda checked the security monitor and saw Chief Engineer Jackson Rodriguez waiting outside. She activated the decontamination cycle and opened the door. "Doctor, sorry to interrupt," Rodriguez said as he stepped through the sterilization field. "Captain wants a status report on all special weapons systems. How are we looking?" Amanda gestured toward the rows of sealed containers lining the laboratory walls. "All compounds are ready for deployment. I've prepared enough of each formula to contaminate the water systems of 50 worlds or disperse through the atmospheric processors of 100 space stations. Delivery methods include aerosol dispersal through the ship's drone network, injection into captured vessels' life support systems, and direct deployment through specialized warheads." Rodriguez nodded grimly. He had helped design the delivery systems, modifying maintenance drones and torpedo warheads to carry Amanda's creations. And the effectiveness? Complete species elimination within 72 hours of exposure. The compounds are engineered to be incredibly contagious within each target species but cannot cross species barriers. A single infected individual could theoretically contaminate their entire planet within weeks. Amanda's voice carried no emotion as she described the potential for mass extinction. "Jesus," Rodriguez muttered. "Sometimes I forget just how thoroughly we're planning to burn everything down." Amanda looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "They started this, Chief. They chose genocide as their solution. We're simply returning the favor with compound interest." Rodriguez had been Earth's most innovative engineer before the war, the man responsible for many of the technological advances that had made human ships competitive with alien vessels. His modifications to the Retribution had turned her from a powerful warship into something approaching a force of nature. The ship's engines could now achieve speeds that should have been impossible for something her size, her shields could absorb energy levels that would vaporize most vessels, and her weapons could punch through defenses that had been considered impregnable. Speaking of burning things down, Rodriguez said, "I've got the final modifications to the main cannon completed. We can now channel the ship's entire power output through the primary firing array. It'll give us a single shot that could crack a moon, but it'll also overload half our systems and leave us vulnerable for several minutes." Amanda raised an eyebrow. "That sounds incredibly dangerous. Everything we're doing is incredibly dangerous. But the captain wants options for taking out the largest possible number of targets in the shortest possible time. This gives us that option." Rodriguez paused, studying the bioweapons containers. "Between your compounds and my modifications, we've basically turned ourselves into a civilization-ending event." "Good," Amanda said simply. "That's exactly what we need to be." Meanwhile, in the ship's tactical center, Commander Torres was running battle simulations with the remaining crew members. The holographic display showed the Nexus system in perfect detail, with every known defensive position, patrol route, and ship deployment highlighted in various colors. Intelligence gathered over 3 years of careful observation had given them a complete picture of how the galaxy's most heavily defended system operated. "All right, people, let's run this again," Torres announced to the 12 crew members gathered around the tactical table. Each of them was cross-trained in multiple specialties out of necessity. They simply didn't have enough people to maintain traditional department divisions. The hologram zoomed in on the system's primary space station, a massive structure that served as the galactic government's administrative center. Nexus Prime Station will be hosting the ceremony. Current intelligence suggests they'll have over 500,000 beings aboard for the celebration, including leadership from every species that participated in our extermination. Ensign Park, now serving as their primary sensor specialist and intelligence analyst, highlighted key targets within the station. The Vorthan High Command will be in the ceremonial chambers on level 847. The Crystalline Hedgemarky's ruling council prefers the zero-gravity conference rooms in Section Delta. Zephyrian royalty will likely be in the diplomatic quarters with artificial atmospheric controls. Defense Network asked Petty Officer Martinez, who had become their weapons specialist after the original gunner died in their last engagement. Torres manipulated the display to show the system's defensive grid. 47 orbital defense platforms, each capable of destroying a standard capital ship. 3 separate early warning networks. At least 200 patrol vessels at any given time. And, during the ceremony, they'll have the largest concentration of military vessels in galactic history. The crew studied the display with the intense focus of people whose lives depended on understanding every detail. They had run this simulation dozens of times, each iteration revealing new challenges and potential solutions. "The key is surprise," Torres continued. "They think we're extinct. Intelligence reports suggest they've completely stopped scanning for human energy signatures. We should be able to get relatively close before they identify us as a threat." "How close?" asked Chief Petty Officer Williams, the senior enlisted survivor who had taken over maintenance of the ship's defensive systems. "Close enough to launch our initial strike before they can coordinate a response. After that, it's going to be a running battle against impossible odds." Torres didn't bother to sugarcoat the situation. Everyone aboard knew this was a suicide mission. Lieutenant Webb looked up from her station, where she had been monitoring long-range communications. "I'm picking up more details about the ceremony. They're calling it a demonstration of unity against chaos. Apparently, they're planning to use our extinction as an example of how the galaxy deals with disruptive elements." A cold silence settled over the tactical center. The aliens weren't just celebrating humanity's death, they were using it as propaganda to justify future genocides. The lesson they wanted to teach was that species who didn't conform to galactic norms would be eliminated for the greater good. "Then, we'll teach them a different lesson," Torres said quietly. "We'll show them that genocide has consequences they never considered." Back in engineering, Rodriguez was making final adjustments to the Retribution's power distribution systems. The modifications he had made over the past 3 years had fundamentally changed how the ship operated. Traditional safety protocols had been abandoned in favor of maximum combat effectiveness. The engines now ran at power levels that should have been catastrophic, contained only by force fields that required constant adjustment. "Computer, run diagnostic on primary weapon systems," he commanded. The ship's artificial intelligence, upgraded with salvaged alien technology and human innovation, responded immediately. All primary systems operational. Plasma cannon arrays operating at 112% of design specifications. Missile systems loaded with both conventional and bioweapon warheads. Main cannon modifications complete and ready for overcharged firing sequence. Rodriguez nodded with satisfaction. The Retribution now carried more destructive power than many entire fleets. But power alone wouldn't be enough against the numbers they would face. They needed to be smart, ruthless, and willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to strike a blow that the galaxy would never forget. His personal workstation chimed with an incoming message from the bridge. Captain Chen's voice came through clearly. "Chief, I need your honest assessment." "Can we do this?" Rodriguez considered the question carefully. They were one ship against hundreds. They were facing the combined military might of multiple species that had been preparing for war for millennia. They would have no support, no backup, and no hope of survival beyond the first few minutes of combat. "Sir, from a purely tactical standpoint, what we're attempting is impossible. We're outnumbered at least 200 to 1. We'll be fighting in their most heavily defended system against crews that know the terrain better than we do. By every rational measure, we should fail completely within minutes of decloak." "But?" Chun prompted. "But, they've never fought a crew that has nothing to lose. They've never faced enemies who measure success not by survival but by how much damage they can inflict before they die. And they've certainly never encountered weapon systems designed specifically to exploit their biological and technological weaknesses." Rodriguez paused. "We can't win, Captain. But we can make them regret ever hearing the word human." The response came immediately. "That's all I need to hear, Chief." "Carry on." As Rodriguez returned to his preparations, he thought about the journey that had brought them to this point. The Retribution had originally been intended as humanity's contribution to galactic peacekeeping forces, a powerful but defensive vessel designed to protect trade routes and maintain stability. Now she was something entirely different, a weapon of vengeance carrying the fury of an extinct species. The modifications he had made reflected that transformation. The ship's defensive capabilities had been sacrificed for increased offensive power. Life support systems had been streamlined to support the skeleton crew more efficiently. Every system had been optimized for a single purpose, delivering maximum destruction to humanity's enemies before inevitably being destroyed in return. In her quarters, Amanda Harrison sealed the last of her bioweapon containers and began the process of loading them into the ship's delivery systems. Each container was labeled with clinical precision, target species, deployment method, estimated casualty projections. The numbers were staggering. If deployed effectively, her creations could eliminate billions of beings across dozens of worlds. She felt no guilt about the potential scope of destruction. The galaxy had chosen this path when they decided that 12 billion humans were acceptable losses for their vision of stability. Now they would learn that extinction was a two-way street, and humans had always been exceptional at adapting their enemies' tactics for their own use. The Retribution continued its journey through hyperspace, carrying its cargo of death toward the largest gathering of galactic leadership in history. In less than 4 days, the galaxy's celebration of peace and unity would become the stage for humanity's final act of defiance. The last free humans in existence were about to teach the universe a lesson it would never forget: never underestimate a species with nothing left to lose. High Admiral Vextar of the Vorthan Imperial Fleet stood on the observation deck of the dreadnought Eternal Dominion, watching as ships from across the galaxy arrived for the Peace Through Strength ceremony. The view was magnificent, hundreds of vessels representing every major civilization, their hulls gleaming with ceremonial decorations and pride. It was a testament to the unity they had achieved through decisive action against the human threat. The Eternal Dominion was the flagship that had led the final assault on Earth 3 years ago. Vextar had personally given the order to begin the bombardment that reduced humanity's homeworld to molten slag. It had been a difficult decision, but necessary for galactic stability. Humans had been too aggressive, too unpredictable, too willing to challenge the established order that had maintained peace for millennia. "Admiral," came the voice of his aide, Junior Commander Kethral, "the ceremonial schedule has been finalized. You're scheduled to present the Vorthan Empire's account of the human conflict to the full assembly." Vextar nodded, his forearms adjusting the medals that decorated his ceremonial uniform. Each medal represented a battle won, a world conquered, an enemy defeated. The newest one, crafted from metal salvaged from Earth's ruins, commemorated the final solution to the human problem. Has there been any word from our intelligence networks regarding human survivors? He asked, though he expected a negative response. They had been thorough in their elimination efforts. None, sir. Our scouts have checked every system that once harbored human settlements. All confirmed dead. The few ships that escaped the initial bombardment were hunted down and destroyed within 18 months. Intelligence estimates the probability of significant human survivors at less than 0.001%. Vextar smiled with satisfaction. The Vorthans had built their empire through methodical efficiency, and the human extermination had been their most successful campaign. Unlike other species they had conquered, humans had fought with a desperate ferocity that had impressed even Vorthan military analysts. But ferocity without numbers was ultimately meaningless. Excellent. The other species need to understand that decisive action produces lasting results. The humans were a cancer that threatened galactic stability. By removing them completely, we've ensured that future generations will never face such a threat. Across the system, aboard the crystalline Hedgemarky's mobile palace Crystal Harmony, Archon Prime Zelathan was addressing a gathering of his species' ruling council. The crystalline beings existed in a state of collective consciousness that made individual decision-making nearly impossible, but their unified perspective allowed them to achieve remarkable consensus on important matters. The human elimination demonstrates the necessity of collective action, Zelathan communicated through harmonic resonances that rippled through the council chamber. Individual species pursuing aggressive expansion threatened the delicate balance we have maintained. The council members, their crystalline forms refracting light in complex patterns, shared memories of human encounters. They remembered the shock of meeting beings who operated as individuals rather than collective entities, who made decisions through chaotic debate rather than harmonic consensus. Humans had been fundamentally incompatible with the galactic order. The celebration serves multiple purposes, another council member resonated. It demonstrates unity against future threats while also establishing precedent for dealing with disruptive species. The galaxy now understands that expansion through conquest will result in complete extinction. Similar conversations were taking place throughout the gathered fleet. The Zephyrian royal family, breathing their methane atmosphere aboard the luxury vessel Skyborn Majesty, discussed the political benefits of the human elimination. The Aquatic Depths Confederation's leaders, swimming in their mobile ocean habitats, shared satisfaction at the removal of a species that had threatened their careful resource management systems. Every species had their reasons for supporting humanity's extinction. Some had seen humans as economic competitors. Others had been frightened by human military innovations. A few had simply been offended by humanity's refusal to accept their assigned place in the galactic hierarchy. But all agreed that the galaxy was safer and more stable without them. What none of them realized was that 4 light-years away, the UHS Retribution was making final preparations for an assault that would shatter their sense of security forever. Captain Chen stood in the ship's memorial chamber, a small room that had been converted into a shrine for humanity's dead. The walls were covered with the names of every human world that had been destroyed, every ship that had been lost, every person who had died in the 3-year war. 12 billion names, displayed in flowing script that would take days to read completely. "We haven't forgotten," he said quietly to the memorial wall. "And we never will." Behind him, the door opened to admit Commander Torres. She stood silently for a moment, reading names she recognized: friends, family members, colleagues who had died fighting an impossible war. "The crew is ready, Marcus," she said finally. "All stations report combat readiness. Dr. Harrison's bioweapons are loaded and armed. Chief Rodriguez has the ship running at maximum efficiency. We're as prepared as we'll ever be." Shen nodded, though he didn't turn away from the memorial. "Have you ever wondered if we're doing the right thing, Elena? If humanity would want to be remembered this way?" Torres considered the question carefully. "I think about the children who died when they bombed the agricultural worlds. I think about the civilians who were vaporized when they hit the research stations. I think about every innocent person who died simply because they were born human." Her voice hardened. "They chose to make this about extermination rather than conquest. They decided that being human was a crime punishable by death. We didn't start this war, but we're going to finish it." Chen finally turned to face her, his expression resolute. "You're right. They wanted to erase us from history. Instead, we're going to make sure they never forget us." The two officers left the memorial chamber and made their way to the bridge, where the skeleton crew was making final preparations for their arrival at Nexus. The ship's sensors showed that they were less than 12 hours from their destination, and intelligence reports indicated that the ceremony was proceeding exactly as planned. Status report, Chen commanded as he took his position in the captain's chair. Lieutenant Webb looked up from her communications station. We're receiving standard system traffic control broadcasts from Nexus. They're not scanning for unidentified vessels. Apparently, the security protocols assume that any ship capable of reaching the system must have proper clearance. Sensor readings? Chen asked. Ensign Park consulted her displays. Massive energy signatures throughout the system. I count 237 capital ships from 15 different species. Nexus Prime Station is showing power consumption levels consistent with maximum occupancy. Conservative estimate puts current population at over 600,000 beings. Chen felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. The entire galactic leadership was gathered in one place, celebrating humanity's extinction without a care in the world. They had no defensive posture, no combat patrols, no indication that they considered themselves to be in any danger. Their arrogance would be their downfall. Chief Rodriguez, report on weapons status, Chen commanded through the ship's communication system. Rodriguez's voice came through clearly from engineering. All weapons systems are operating at maximum efficiency, Captain. Main cannon is ready for overcharged firing sequence. Missile systems are loaded with both conventional and bioweapon warheads. The ship can sustain maximum combat operations for approximately 47 minutes before critical systems failure. Chen nodded grimly. 47 minutes to inflict as much damage as possible before the Retribution succumbed to overwhelming enemy fire. It would have to be enough. Dr. Harrison, are your delivery systems ready? Amanda's voice carried the clinical precision she had maintained throughout their preparations. All bioweapon compounds are loaded and ready for deployment. I've prepared targeted formulations for every species currently represented at the ceremony. Delivery drones are armed and awaiting launch commands. The bridge crew exchanged glances as they realized the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. They weren't just planning to attack the largest military gathering in galactic history, they were preparing to potentially extinct multiple alien species in a single engagement. The irony was stark. Humanity's last act would be to use the galaxy's own tactics against them. Commander Torres, final tactical assessment, Chen requested. Torres activated the main display, showing their planned approach vector and attack sequence. We'll drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the system's asteroid field, approximately 8 million kilometers from Nexus Prime Station. The asteroids will provide some cover for our initial approach, but will be detected within minutes of arrival. She highlighted key target positions throughout the system. Primary targets are the command ships of species that directly participated in our extermination. Secondary targets are the station's critical infrastructure and the ceremonial chambers where the leadership is gathered. Tertiary targets are any vessels that attempt to coordinate a defensive response. Estimated enemy response time? Chen asked. Best case scenario, we have 6 minutes before they can mount an organized counterattack. Worst case, they respond within 3 minutes with overwhelming force. Torres paused, studying the tactical display. Sir, I want to be clear about our situation. Even if everything goes perfectly, our maximum survival time is measured in minutes, not hours. Chen looked around the bridge at his crew, the last free humans in the galaxy. They had volunteered for this mission knowing it was suicide. They had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, training for a battle they couldn't win but refused to avoid. Each of them had lost everything that mattered, and now they were ready to make that loss mean something. I know, he said simply. But we're not here to survive. We're here to ensure that humanity's extinction comes with a price so terrible that no species will ever again think genocide is an acceptable solution to their problems. The Retribution continued its approach through hyperspace, carrying its cargo of vengeance toward the galaxy's moment of celebration. In less than 12 hours, the beings who had orchestrated humanity's extinction would learn that their victory had been premature. They thought they had eliminated the human threat completely. They were about to discover just how wrong they had been. The galaxy had let its guard down, convinced that the last remnants of humanity had been hunted down and destroyed. They were celebrating their success without any consideration for the possibility that they had missed something important. But humans had always been exceptional at survival, and the crew of the Retribution represented the absolute best of human military capability. They were carrying weapons designed specifically to exploit alien weaknesses, powered by the desperate fury of a species with nothing left to lose. The celebration was about to become a funeral, and the galaxy would never again underestimate the price of making humans their enemies. The storm was coming, and it carried the promise of justice written in fire and blood across the stars themselves. The UHS Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus System's asteroid field with the silence of a predator stalking its prey. Captain Chen stood on the bridge, watching as his ship's sensors painted a picture of the galaxy's greatest celebration. Hundreds of alien vessels hung in space like glittering jewels, their hulls decorated with ceremonial lights and victory banners. "Stealth systems engaged," reported Chief Rodriguez from Engineering. "We're running silent on all frequencies. Sensor shadow from the asteroids is masking our energy signature." "Passive sensors only," Chen commanded. "I want to know everything about their disposition before we make our move." Ensign Park bent over her sensor station, her hands dancing across the controls as she gathered intelligence on their targets. "Reading massive energy signatures throughout the system, Captain. The alien fleet is arranged in a ceremonial formation around Nexus Prime Station. No combat patrols active. Defensive platforms are powered down to minimum operational status." Chen smiled grimly. The aliens' confidence in their security was about to become their greatest weakness. 3 years of hiding in the outer darkness had taught the Retribution's crew patience, and now that patience was about to pay dividends they could never have imagined. "Tactical analysis, Commander Torres," he requested. Torres manipulated the holographic display to show the enemy formation in detail. "They're arranged for maximum visual impact rather than defensive capability. The Vorthan command ships are clustered near the station's primary docking bay. Crystalline vessels are maintaining perfect geometric formation in the central approaches. Zephyri and Royal ships are positioned for optimal viewing of the ceremonial displays. In other words, they've arranged themselves perfectly for our attack," Chen observed. "Better than we could have hoped, sir. They're so focused on pageantry that they've completely ignored basic tactical positioning." On Nexus Prime Station, the ceremonial gathering was reaching its climax. Representatives from every species that had participated in humanity's extinction were present in the massive assembly chamber, a spherical room that could accommodate beings with various atmospheric and gravitational requirements. High Admiral Vextar of the Vorthan Empire stood at the central podium, his forearms gesturing as he addressed the gathered delegates. 3 years ago, we faced a choice between stability and chaos. The human species had demonstrated repeatedly that they could not be integrated into our peaceful galactic community. Their aggressive expansion, their refusal to accept established territorial boundaries, their disturbing tendency toward individual action rather than collective decision-making, all of these factors made them incompatible with civilized society. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Crystalline Confederation's representatives resonated with harmonic approval. The Zephyrian delegation adjusted their breathing apparatus and nodded in unison. Even the typically reserved Aquatic Depths representatives expressed satisfaction through their translation devices. The decision to implement final solution protocols was not made lightly, Vextar continued. But the complete elimination of the human threat has vindicated our choice. For 3 years, the galaxy has enjoyed unprecedented peace and stability. Trade routes are secure. Territorial disputes have ceased. The chaotic element that threatened our civilization has been removed permanently. None of the assembled beings noticed the small maintenance drone that had detached itself from a service panel and was now moving silently through the station's ventilation system. The drone was no larger than a human fist, equipped with advanced stealth technology and carrying a payload that would have been impossible to detect with standard security scans. Dr. Harrison monitored the drone's progress from her laboratory aboard the Retribution. "Delivery System Alpha is in position," she reported to the bridge. "Target, station's atmospheric processing center. Compound deployment will begin on your command." "Hold position," Chen commanded. "All units maintain ready status until we begin primary assault." Back in the assembly chamber, Archon Prime Zelathan of the Crystalline Confederation had taken the podium, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's lights into spectacular patterns. The human elimination serves as a template for future action against disruptive elements, he resonated through the chamber's harmonic amplifiers. Any species that threatens galactic stability through aggressive expansion or refusal to accept established protocols will face similar consequences. The delegates responded with enthusiasm. The threat had been eliminated, the precedent established, and the galaxy secured against future disruptions. They saw themselves as guardians of civilization, protectors of an order that had brought peace to trillions of beings across countless worlds. What they didn't see were the dozens of additional drones that had infiltrated not just the station, but many of the ships in the ceremonial fleet. Each drone carried compounds specifically designed to target different alien species, weapons that would turn their own biology against them in ways that conventional defenses couldn't prevent. Aboard the Retribution, Chen made his final preparations for an assault that would echo through galactic history. All hands, this is the captain. In 60 seconds, we begin our attack. Remember what we're fighting for. Remember who we've lost. And remember that today, humanity strikes back. The countdown began with mechanical precision. Throughout the ship, the last free humans in the galaxy took their positions for what they knew would be their final battle. In engineering, Rodriguez made last-minute adjustments to power distribution systems that would channel the ship's entire energy output through weapons designed to crack planets. In the bioweapons laboratory, Harrison armed her delivery systems with compounds that could extinct entire species. In the tactical center, Torres coordinated target assignments that would maximize damage in the brief time they would have before being overwhelmed. 30 seconds to attack, Chen announced. On his personal display, he could see the names of every human world that had been destroyed, every ship that had been lost, every person who had died in the 3-year war. 12 billion names that the galaxy wanted to forget. 12 billion reasons why the Retribution was about to remind everyone that humans never forgot their dead. 10 seconds to attack. The alien celebration continued in blissful ignorance of the storm that was about to break over them. High Admiral Vextar was concluding his speech with a toast to galactic unity. Delegates raised ceremonial beverages from their homeworlds in salute to their mutual security. The largest gathering of galactic leadership in history was focused entirely on congratulating themselves for their successful genocide. 5 seconds. Chen's hand hovered over the firing controls, feeling the weight of species survival in that single moment. The next few minutes would determine whether humanity's extinction would be a footnote in galactic history or a cautionary tale that would be remembered for millennia. Execute. The UHS Retribution erupted from the asteroid field like an avenging angel, her weapons systems coming online simultaneously as she accelerated toward the alien fleet at speeds that should have been impossible for a ship her size. Every modification Rodriguez had made over 3 years of desperate preparation paid off as the ship's engines propelled her toward the enemy formation faster than their sensors could track. All weapons, fire at will, Chen commanded. The Retribution's plasma cannon arrays spoke first, sending streams of superheated energy across space to impact the nearest Vorthan vessels. The alien ceremonial formation meant their shields were configured for display rather than combat, and the human weapons punched through their defenses like they were made of paper. 3 Vorthan cruisers exploded in brilliant fireballs before their crews even realized they were under attack. Bioweapon drones launching, Harrison reported as dozens of stealth drones detached from the Retribution and spread throughout the system. Each one carried death tailored specifically for its target species, weapons that would turn the aliens' own biology against them. The main display showed chaos erupting throughout the alien fleet as ships desperately tried to transition from ceremonial formation to combat readiness. But the Retribution's assault was too sudden, too coordinated, and too precisely targeted for them to mount an immediate response. Main cannon charging for overcharged firing sequence, Rodriguez announced from engineering. Target, Nexus Prime Station. Chen watched as the massive space station began to respond to the attack, its defensive systems finally coming online after 3 years of peaceful operation. But the response was too slow, too disorganized. The station's crew had grown complacent during the long peace, and they were paying the price for their overconfidence. Fire, Chen commanded. The Retribution's main cannon discharged with the force of a small star, channeling the ship's entire power output into a single devastating beam of coherent energy. The blast struck Nexus Prime Station's central core and punched completely through its structure, vaporizing entire sections and causing catastrophic failures throughout the massive facility. The station's lights flickered and died as power systems overloaded. Atmosphere began venting from multiple hull breaches. Emergency alarms wailed across communication frequencies as hundreds of thousands of beings realized they were trapped aboard a dying structure. But the bioweapons were already doing their work. In the station's ceremonial chamber, delegates who had been celebrating humanity's extinction began to show signs of infection. Vorthan delegates clutched their throats as their respiratory systems began to shut down. Crystalline beings watched in horror as their molecular structure began to destabilize. Zephyri and royalty gasped for breath as their specialized atmosphere became toxic to their altered physiology. Direct hit on station's central core, Torres reported. Massive structural damage. Their life support systems are failing across multiple sections. Enemy response? Chen asked, even as the Retribution's weapons continued to hammer alien vessels throughout the system. Confused and uncoordinated. They're trying to reorganize, but our bioweapons are causing chaos aboard multiple ships. I'm reading emergency signals from vessels throughout the fleet. The aliens' communications networks filled with desperate calls for medical assistance as crew members began dying from diseases they couldn't identify or treat. The compounds Harrison had designed were working exactly as intended, turning the aliens' own biology against them in ways that their medical technology couldn't prevent. Admiral Vextar survived the initial assault on Nexus Prime Station, but found himself trapped in an emergency shelter as the massive facility died around him. Through the shelter's communication system, he could hear reports from across his fleet, ships going dark, crews succumbing to unknown diseases, the careful order of his formation dissolving into chaos. How is this possible? He demanded of his communications officer, a younger Vorthan whose ceremonial uniform was now stained with the biological fluids that leaked from his failing respiratory system. The humans are extinct. We eliminated them completely. Unknown vessel detected in the attack formation, the officer gasped, struggling to speak as the bioweapon attacked his physiology. Energy signature, consistent with human technology. Vextar felt something cold settle in his chest that had nothing to do with the failing life support systems. Show me. The display activated, revealing the Retribution as she carved through his fleet like a blade through silk. The ship's hull was scarred and patched from countless battles, but her weapons were operating with deadly precision. She was unmistakably human in design, and she was systematically destroying everything that had participated in humanity's extinction. Impossible, Vextar whispered. We killed them all. We hunted down every survivor. The human species is extinct. But the evidence was undeniable. Somehow, impossibly, the humans had survived. And now they had returned to exact a price for their extinction that would echo through galactic history. The Retribution continued her assault, her weapons reaching out to touch ship after ship with deadly precision. Each blast was targeted with the knowledge gained from 3 years of studying alien weaknesses, each attack designed to cause maximum damage with minimum expenditure of ammunition. The humans were outnumbered hundreds to one, but they were fighting with the desperate fury of a species that had nothing left to lose. And, for the first time in 3 years, the galaxy was beginning to understand exactly what that fury could accomplish when properly applied. The UHS Retribution carved through the alien fleet like a scythe through wheat, her weapons reaching out to touch ship after ship with deadly precision. Captain Chen stood on his bridge, watching as 3 years of careful preparation and desperate fury transformed into the most devastating single-ship assault in galactic history. Status report, he commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. 37 enemy vessels destroyed or disabled, Commander Torres reported, her hands dancing across tactical controls as she coordinated their continuing assault. Bioweapons showing full effectiveness across all target species. Nexus Prime Station is experiencing catastrophic systems failures on multiple levels. Through the main viewport, Chen could see the massive space station that had been the center of galactic government. Emergency lights flickered across its surface as atmosphere vented from dozens of hull breaches. The ceremonial chamber where the galaxy's leadership had been celebrating humanity's extinction was now a tomb filled with beings dying from diseases that attacked their very biology. Incoming communications, Lieutenant Webb announced. Multiple emergency broadcasts on all frequencies. They're calling for medical assistance, evacuation support, military reinforcement. Let them call, Chen said grimly. No one's coming to save them. They made sure of that when they scattered their forces across the galaxy to maintain their new territorial claims. The irony was perfect. The aliens had divided up humanity's former territories among themselves, spreading their military forces thin to occupy and defend their new acquisitions. The very greed that had motivated their genocide had left them unable to mount an effective defense when humanity's ghost came calling for revenge. Admiral Vextar struggled through the dying corridors of Nexus Prime Station, his breathing apparatus filtering the toxic atmosphere that now filled much of the facility. Around him, beings from across the galaxy were succumbing to bioweapons specifically designed to target their unique physiologies. The Crystalline Confederation delegates were cracking apart as their molecular bonds destabilized. Zephyrian royalty gasped for breath as their specialized atmosphere became poison. Even the hardy aquatic depths representatives were dying as their bodily fluids turned acidic. "Admiral," came the voice of his aide through the emergency communication system, "the Eternal Dominion is requesting immediate evacuation. Our crew is experiencing significant casualties from unknown biological agents." Vextar paused at an observation window, looking out at the battle raging in space. The human ship, impossible as it seemed, was engaged with multiple vessels simultaneously, her weapons systems operating with an efficiency that defied everything they thought they knew about human technology. She should have been overwhelmed within minutes, but instead she was systematically destroying ships that had taken decades to build. "How many survivors in our fleet?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Current estimate, less than 40% combat effectiveness across all vessels. The biological weapons are spreading through our life support systems faster than medical teams can respond. We've never encountered anything like this." That was the truth that none of them wanted to acknowledge. They had underestimated human biological knowledge just as they had underestimated human fury. The same species they had dismissed as chaotic and undisciplined had created weapons that turned their enemies' strengths into weaknesses, their biology into their own destruction. Aboard the Retribution, Dr. Harrison monitored the progress of her compounds with clinical precision. "Bioweapon effectiveness exceeding projections," she reported to the bridge. "Compound V7 is showing 97% lethality among Vorthan populations. Compound Z3 is causing complete respiratory system failure in Zephyrian targets. Compound C12 is destabilizing crystalline physiology at the molecular level." Each report was delivered with the same professional detachment she had once used to describe medical breakthroughs that saved lives. Now her expertise was ending them by the thousands, turning the galaxy's own biology against itself in ways that conventional weapons could never achieve. "Delivery drone network status?" Chen asked. 37 drones successfully deployed across multiple target vessels. Each drone is carrying enough compound to contaminate an entire ship's life support system. Conservative estimate suggests we've infected over 200,000 beings with species-specific pathogens. Chen nodded grimly. The numbers were staggering, but they represented more than mere casualties. Each death was a message that humanity's extinction had come with a price that the galaxy was only beginning to understand. In the tactical center, Torres coordinated the Retribution's continuing assault with the desperate efficiency of someone who knew her time was limited. Priority targets neutralized or destroyed. Moving to secondary objectives. Time to critical systems failure, 23 minutes. The ship's overcharged weapons systems were burning through components faster than they could be replaced, but they had accomplished more in the past hour than anyone had thought possible. The largest gathering of galactic leadership in history was dying around them, victims of their own arrogance and humanity's refusal to go quietly into extinction. Enemy response coordination improving, Torres continued. They're finally starting to organize a concentrated counterattack. Chen looked at the tactical display, where dozens of alien vessels were converging on their position. The Retribution had surprised them, devastated them, and shown them the price of genocide. But the laws of physics were immutable, and one ship could only fight so many enemies for so long. "All stations, prepare for final phase," he announced shipwide. "We've shown them that humanity refuses to be forgotten. Now we show them the cost of making us their enemies." Chief Rodriguez's voice came through from engineering. "Captain, main cannon is ready for final overcharged sequence. This will drain our remaining power reserves and overload primary systems. After this shot, we'll have maybe 5 minutes before complete systems failure." "Understood, Chief." "Target selection?" Torres highlighted a specific ship on the tactical display, the Vorthan Dreadnought Eternal Dominion, the same vessel that had led the final assault on Earth 3 years ago. "Admiral Vextar's flagship, sir. The ship that gave the order to begin humanity's extinction." Chen felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. The symmetry was perfect. The ship that had fired the first shot in humanity's genocide would be destroyed by humanity's last vessel. "Lock weapons and fire when ready." The Retribution's main cannon charged for the final time, channeling every remaining bit of power into a single devastating blast. The beam that emerged was brighter than a star, a lance of pure energy that crossed space in an instant to strike the Eternal Dominion's central hull. The Vorthan Dreadnought, a massive vessel that had served as the backbone of their Imperial fleet for over a century, simply ceased to exist. The overcharged beam punched through her shields, armor, and superstructure as if they weren't there, triggering a chain reaction that vaporized the ship and everyone aboard in a brilliant flash of destructive energy. Admiral Vextar, still trapped aboard the dying Nexus Prime station, watched through an observation window as his flagship became an expanding cloud of superheated plasma. The ship that had led his species to victory after victory, that had been the symbol of Vorthan military might, was gone as if it had never existed. "This is impossible," he whispered to himself. "One ship cannot do this. One crew cannot defeat an entire fleet." But the evidence was undeniable. The humans, somehow, impossibly alive, had struck back with a fury that defied every strategic calculation. They had turned the galaxy's moment of celebration into a funeral, their weapons into instruments of justice, their own extinction into a lesson that would echo through history. Aboard the Retribution, warning alarms began sounding as critical systems started to fail. The overcharged weapons had pushed the ship beyond her design limits, and she was beginning to die around her crew. But her mission was nearly complete. "Chief Rodriguez to bridge," came the engineer's voice through failing communication systems. "Cascade failures in primary systems. We have maybe 4 minutes before total power loss." Dr. Harrison, final bioweapon deployment, Chen commanded. "All remaining compounds released," Amanda confirmed. "Drones are dispersing throughout the surviving fleet. Conservative estimate, another 50,000 beings will be infected within the next hour." Chen nodded with grim satisfaction. They had done the impossible. One ship, one crew, driven by the fury of an extinct species, had struck a blow that would echo through galactic history. The beings who had celebrated humanity's extinction were dying by the thousands, victims of their own arrogance and the human refusal to accept defeat. "Commander Torres, shipwide communication," he requested. "Channel open, Captain." Chen activated the communication system that would broadcast his final message not just to his crew, but to every surviving alien vessel in the system. When he spoke, his words would be heard by the beings who had orchestrated humanity's extinction. "This is Captain Marcus Chen of the United Human Ship Retribution, speaking to the beings who thought they had eliminated the human threat. 3 years ago, you chose genocide as your solution to our independence. You turned our worlds to ash, hunted down our survivors, and celebrated our extinction as a victory for galactic stability." He paused, looking around the bridge at his crew, the last free humans in the galaxy, who had given everything to strike this blow for justice. "You were wrong. Humanity does not surrender. We do not forgive. And we never forget our dead. Today, you have learned the price of making humans your enemies. Every being dying from our bioweapons, every ship burning in space, every life ending in terror, this is the cost of genocide." The communication system crackled as ship's power began failing. "You wanted to erase us from history. Instead, you have ensured that humanity will be remembered forever. Every species that considers genocide as a solution to their problems will remember what happened here. They will remember that extinction is a two-way street, and humans are exceptionally good at ensuring their enemies pay for their crimes." Chen looked one last time at the tactical display, where dozens of alien vessels were burning or drifting powerless through space. The largest gathering of galactic leadership in history was dying around them, and the galaxy's carefully maintained order was collapsing into chaos. The human species may be extinct, but our message lives on. Never again underestimate beings who have nothing left to lose. Never again think that genocide comes without consequences. And never again celebrate victory until you're certain your enemies are truly dead. The Retribution's power systems failed with a cascade of sparks and dying lights. But her mission was complete. She had struck back at the beings who had destroyed humanity, shown them the price of extinction, and ensured that their species' name would be remembered with both fear and respect. The galaxy would never again let its guard down when dealing with beings who refused to accept defeat. They had learned that lesson written in fire and blood across the stars themselves, and it was a lesson they would never forget. As the Retribution died in space, her crew faced the end with the satisfaction of knowing they had kept faith with 12 billion dead humans. They had struck back against impossible odds, delivered justice to their enemies, and ensured that humanity's extinction came with a price that would echo through galactic history. The galaxy had made the mistake of underestimating human fury. They would never make that mistake again.